She was humiliated in a luxury store, until a millionaire in line said, "She's my wife." The icy wind sliced through Fifth Avenue like a blade. Amélie, her fingers frozen and eyes glowing with quiet excitement, stopped in front of one of Manhattan's most exclusive boutiques, Léonce Couture. Inside, a cobalt blue dress floated under golden lighting, so ethereal it seemed to defy gravity. It looked almost identical to her mother's favorite sketch, the one Amélie kept folded inside her purse, the edges worn soft by time. She stepped inside. A soft bell chimed. Marble floors, gilded mirrors, the hushed whispers of wealthy women. It felt as though she had crossed into a world that wasn't hers. Her cheap shoes echoed timidly across the pristine floor. With delicate steps, she approached the dress, her eyes soaked in every seam, every fold. She brushed her fingers across the hem, unaware of the shadow forming behind her. "If you're not buying, please keep your distance," came a sharp voice. Turning, Amélie faced a woman with perfect posture, tightly pinned hair, and a golden name tag. Veronica Moreau, store manager. Behind her, two elegant clients watched the scene unfold with thin, cruel smiles. "Perhaps you didn't realize, sweetheart," Veronica said with a patronizing tone, "but this is a private space, for people with taste and means." Amélie swallowed hard. Her cheeks flushed. She tried to smile, to explain she was just admiring the dress, that her mother used to sew ones just like it back in rural Georgia, that, "We're not here to collect life stories," Veronica cut in. "We're here to sell, and you're in the way." Now every gaze in the boutique was on her. One woman whispered, "Unbelievable." A security guard appeared by the door. Amélie stepped back. Then again, her pride was caught in her throat, and the dress blurred behind tears she refused to let fall. She was just about to leave quietly, when a man's voice rang out from the back of the store, calm, cold, commanding. "Are you sure you want to treat my wife like that?" Silence hit the room like a dropped glass. Everyone turned at once. At the checkout line, in a black overcoat and leather gloves, stood a tall man, posture flawless, gaze cold as winter. Julian Westbrook. And for the first time that day, it was Veronica's face that lost all color. Time seemed to freeze. The word wife hung in the air like a dissonant note in a room finely tuned by arrogance. Veronica blinked, thrown off balance. "Excuse me." Her voice faltered for the first time. Julian Westbrook walked slowly toward the center of the boutique, with the calm of someone who owned the ground he walked on. His gaze passed briefly over Amélie, eyes still glassy, cheeks burning with shame, before settling firmly on Veronica. "I asked if humiliating customers who walk in with my wife is standard practice here," he repeated, voice low and dangerous. Amélie tried to speak, to say she didn't even know him, but nothing came out. Shame had morphed into disbelief, and disbelief into a strange curiosity. "Mr. Westbrook, of course that wasn't my intention," Veronica stammered. She didn't present herself as, "So now it's her fault," he cut in, one eyebrow raised, just enough to sting. The manager shrank. The client stepped back, muttering about reputation and VIP treatment. The security guard quietly disappeared. Julian turned to Amélie. "Are you all right?" he asked, his tone softer now, almost imperceptibly gentle. She only nodded, unsure if this was real, or some elaborate, surreal performance. He looked at her again, but differently this time. There was something in his eyes, interest, intention. "You picked the right dress. You're taking it," he said, not as a suggestion, but as a fact. "Think of it as a gift. From a very protective husband." Amélie gasped. "Sir, I really can't accept. Are you contradicting me in front of everyone?" He whispered so only she could hear, and for some reason, it didn't sound like a threat, it sounded like an opening. Veronica swallowed hard, and rushed to prepare the box. Julian gave Amélie one last look, a faint, unreadable smile, forming at the corner of his lips. "Wait for me outside. There's something I need to propose," and then he turned away, as if the scene had ended. But for Amélie, it had only just begun. Outside, with the dress in her arms and her heart racing, Amélie stood under the drizzle, that had begun to silver the cobblestones of Fifth Avenue. She leaned against a lamppost, unsure whether she was holding a trophy or a reminder of humiliation. The cobalt blue fabric felt heavier now, or maybe it was the moment pressing on her shoulders. And then, he appeared. Julian Westbrook walked with the calm of someone who'd never needed to rush. His wool coat sliced through the wind like armor, hands tucked in his pockets. His gaze stayed sharp, direct, like a man about to make a surgical decision. He stopped a few steps from her. "Are you all right?" he asked again, without hesitation. Amélie studied him carefully, not answering right away. The last hour had been a storm. First, the humiliation, and the defense, and now, the silence between them. A silence as strange as it was intimate. "I don't understand why you did that," she finally said. "You don't know me. You shouldn't have gotten involved." Julian looked up at the gray sky for a moment, then back at her. "Maybe not," he said, with a shrug. "But there was something in the way you looked at that dress. It wasn't desire, it was memory.
Oops.
And no one deserves to have that ripped away in public." The words disarmed her. For a moment, Amélie forgot where she was. He didn't sound like he pitied her. It was more like, he recognized something in her he'd lost himself. "And now what?" she asked. "You just disappear like none of this happened." He gave a slight smile. Small, almost invisible. "I'm not the disappearing type, but I'm not one for long explanations either." He pulled a black card from his coat pocket. Sleek, understated, silver lettering.
Eee.
No logo, no hint of what it meant, except a name, Julian Westbrook, and an address in fine print on the back. "If you want to know why I did it,
No.
meet me tomorrow.
9 a.m. Manhattan West, Tower 5.
20 minutes, no strings." She hesitated.
Oops.
"And if I don't come, life goes on," he said, stepping back. "But maybe you'll miss the chance to realize that sometimes, accidents aren't so accidental." She held the card with trembling fingers, and as she did, her eyes caught a glimpse across the street, a black Bentley with tinted windows, a uniformed driver waiting by the door, and her. She still needed 2 subway lines to get back to the basement apartment she rented in the suburbs. Julian was already walking toward the car when she called out, "Wife, that was just a bluff, wasn't it?"
Oops.
He stopped, turned slowly, his eyes half covered by the edge of his collar. "Depends. Are you planning to take the role?" Amélie didn't answer, neither did he. The silence closed in between them, like an invisible door. But deep down, they both knew.
Gee.
What started as an impulsive gesture was about to become something much more binding. The Manhattan West building wasn't just tall, it was intimidating. From the outside it looked like liquid glass and polished stone, as if every inch was whispering,
Eee.
"You don't belong here." Amélie stood at the main entrance, with a knot in her throat, and both hands stuffed into the pockets of her worn coat.
No.
She had arrived 15 minutes early,
Eee.
just to give herself time to back out.
Eee.
But she hadn't. The receptionist, dressed in ivory, and wearing a robotic smile, didn't flinch when she heard the name Julian Westbrook. "He's expecting you." Top floor. As the panoramic elevator ascended, Amélie watched the city shrink beneath her feet. Buildings, cars, people.
Eee.
Everything looked smaller from up here. Her heart was pounding. And not just because of the height.
Oh.
The doors opened with a soft electronic sigh. Silence. The entire floor seemed to belong to Julian. A minimalist corridor, thick carpets, the scent of imported coffee and new leather. At the end, a glass-walled office where he stood, looking out over Manhattan as if it were his. She knocked gently on the glass door. "Come in," he said, without turning around. Emily stepped forward, hesitant. He looked different than the day before. No overcoat, just a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His hair tousled in a way that felt deliberate. He held a cup of coffee in his left hand. With the right, he flipped through documents. "Punctuality is a rare trait. I like that," he said finally, meeting her eyes. She didn't reply. She was still trying to understand what she was doing there. Would you like to tell me what all of this is about? She asked, steadying her voice like a shield against a world that might swallow her whole. Julian nodded. He set down the cup, walked to the glass desk, and pulled out a black folder. He slid it across to her. Read it. Inside, legal documents, contracts, a press release already drafted, and the headline, CEO Julian Westbrook announces engagement to emerging fashion designer. Emily looked up, stunned. Is this a joke? It's a proposal. Pretend to be my fiancé for 3 months. In return, you'll get access to my network, the funding to start your own label. And after that, we go back to being strangers. She let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. Why do you even need a fake fiancé? Julian stepped closer. His voice dropped to a near whisper. Because the board wants to replace me. They think I'm unstable, that I'm a machine, cold, a man without a life outside work. And I, he paused, need them to believe otherwise. Just for a little while. Emily crossed her arms. And I look stable to you. She challenged. You realize I'm just a girl with debt, a basement room, and a degree no one respects. Julian smiled, not mocking, but sincere. That's exactly why you're perfect. You've got nothing to lose, and maybe something to gain. She didn't answer. For a few seconds, only the distant pulse of the city filled the room. And if I say no? She asked. Julian didn't hesitate. Then you're free to go, but you'll go back to being invisible to this world. And frankly, you don't look like someone who fits that role anymore. Emily took a deep breath. The luxury of the office, the scent of polished wood, the sheen of the papers in front of her. It all felt surreal, but for the first time, someone truly saw her, and offered not pity, but a stage. She extended her hand. 3 months. After that we disappear from each other's lives. Julian shook her hand, firm, without hesitation. 3 months. But deep down they both knew, nothing about this arrangement would be simple, and neither of them would walk away unscathed. The temporary apartment Julian arranged for Emily was on the 39th floor of a residential tower overlooking Central Park. It was larger than anywhere she'd ever lived, and quieter than any place she'd ever been. It didn't even feel real. In the first few days, everything felt like a strange performance. Meetings with image consultants, styling sessions, paparazzi, who accidentally caught candid shots of the couple, staged kisses, practiced glances. But what unsettled Emily most was Julian's gaze. Always composed, always distant. At night she'd see him standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his apartment, 1 floor above hers. Alone. No phone, no wine, nothing. Just watching the city like he was searching for something that couldn't be found. On the 3rd week, during a formal dinner with investors, one of the board members, a heavy man in an orange tie, made a subtle joke about strategic relationships. Julian gave a polite smile, but his fingers tightened around his glass just a bit too hard. The glass cracked. No one noticed, but Emily did. She always did. Later in the car ride home, she broke the script. You don't like lying, do you? Julian stared out the window for a moment before answering. I don't like needing to. She turned toward him in the dark, eyes steady. Then why me? Why not just hire an actress? He hesitated, then muttered, because an actress would fake it for everyone. You only pretend when you absolutely have to, and the rest of the time, you feel. Emily didn't respond. Was that a compliment, or a warning? The next morning, she found an envelope slipped under her apartment door. No name, no return address, just one word, cut out from a newspaper. Westbrook. Inside was a blurred photo of Julian, with another woman, older, dark hair, her face turned halfway from the camera. On the back of the photo, a single handwritten sentence. Do you know who he really is? Emily spent the entire morning, staring at the image, unsure of what hurt more. The fear that it might be true, or the anger at herself for wanting to know. That evening, Julian didn't show up for their scheduled dinner, and for the first time, Emily felt something that wasn't part of the contract. Jealousy, not of the man himself, but of the life he kept hidden, the ghosts he never showed. and the suffocating certainty that she had agreed to play a role in a theater built over a minefield. Julian arrived late that night. The clock had already passed 11 when his apartment door opened with a sharp click. Emily was waiting, not on the sofa like a patient hostess, but standing, the photo still in her hand, like someone who came for answers. Too busy for dinner, or just busy with her? She asked, the bitterness in her voice unfiltered. Julian took off his coat, tossing it onto the chair with a calm that bordered on defiance. You're waiting in the dark to play guessing games, Emily. Who is she? She raised the photo. And why would someone leave this at my door with that kind of message? He stepped closer, slowly, until the space between them felt like a tight wire of tension. What exactly are you accusing me of? He asked, voice low, almost dangerous. Of hiding things, of using me, of playing with half-truths. Julian took the photo from her hand, studied it for a few seconds, then without a word, tore it cleanly in half, and threw the pieces into the fireplace. The woman in the photo is Catherine. It was the first time he said the name without a mask. She was my wife. She died 4 years ago. The silence that followed seemed to pulse inside the walls. She jumped off the balcony of my parents' house. She didn't leave a note, no explanation, she just vanished. And ever since, whenever something significant happens in my life, a new deal, a major launch, a step forward, that same photo shows up. No signature, no source. Emily stood frozen. She didn't know what to say. Julian looked her straight in the eyes. You wanted the truth, Emily. Here it is. I'm not just a cold CEO trying to save his image. I'm a man who, maybe never forgave himself. And now I have you, a stranger with hungry eyes and a restless soul, pretending to be my redemption in front of investors. Is that what you wanted to hear? She felt her heart pounding against her ribs like a drum. You're not the only one with ghosts, Julian, she said, voice shaking. I lost someone too. My brother vanished 3 years ago. 1 missed call, 1 suitcase left behind. No note, no answers. So stop acting like the world revolves around your pain. For a moment they just stared at each other. 2 strangers bound by a lie, and by wounds no magazine photo could ever reveal. Julian reached for a bottle of whiskey, and poured 2 glasses, handed one to her. I don't like being confronted. Neither do I, she replied, downing the drink in one go. A half smile curved on his lips. I think we're starting to be real. Emily nodded, watching the flames flicker in the fireplace.
What does worthless wall does what Rose.
Julian knocked back his drink. Then, without looking at her, he said quietly, then, let's make this performance one worth remembering. In the days that followed that night of confession, something shifted between them, not outwardly, but in the empty spaces, in the unspoken gestures, in the glances that lingered a second longer than necessary. The act continued. Events, lunches with board members, public appearances, but something had changed backstage. The silences weren't as uncomfortable. The accidental touches didn't feel quite so accidental anymore. And the questions neither of them asked became louder. One rainy Sunday afternoon, Emily received an unexpected message. No suits today. I need company, not a character. Jay, she smiled, without really knowing why. Julian picked her up himself. No driver, no entourage, in an old car, unlike any of his usual luxury sedans. It was a restored black Mustang, a rich man pretending to be simple, or a rich man missing the time when he was just a man. Do you drive? He asked, opening the passenger door. Only cars that don't cost more than my life. She climbed in, and for the first time in days, he laughed. Their destination was a hidden greenhouse in Brooklyn, a secret garden on the rooftop of an old building, where Julian kept rare plants, black orchids, blue roses, and a Japanese tree that looked like it belonged to another time. This is where I come, when I need to remember that control is an illusion, he said, watering the leaves in slow, deliberate motions. These things don't respond to voice commands. No timelines. They grow when they want, die when they want, Emily watched him with a new kind of curiosity. Why did you bring me here? Julian rested the watering can on a wooden bench, then looked at her. Because today, I don't need an actress by my side. Just someone who stays, without trying to fix anything. She sat on the floor, crossing her legs. Lucky for you, I'm terrible at fixing anything. That's not true, he murmured. You don't know anything about me, Julian. I know enough to recognize someone who pretends to be strong, because they learned that showing pain attracts predators. She held his gaze for a few seconds, then looked away. And there, in the middle of the quiet, a confession slipped out. When my brother disappeared, I spent months creating versions. That he ran away, that he was taken, that maybe he wanted a new life. But the truth is, the world just swallowed him. And that left me with something no one ever warned me about: guilt, like it was my responsibility to keep searching. Julian sat beside her, silent. I understand, he said finally. Catherine left without giving me a reason, and I spend my days trying to be so functional, so polished, so empty, that no one asks questions anymore. Does it work? She asked. No, but it's convincing. Emily gave a bitter smile. You should write a book. How to Survive by Pretending You Don't Feel. You'd be the co-author, he replied, with a tired half smile. The wind rustled through the leaves, soft as the sigh of an old tree. The city felt far away. For the first time they weren't performing. They weren't selling anything to the world. They were just being. Later that evening, back at the apartment, Emily accidentally let her head fall onto his shoulder, while they sat on the couch, watching a movie neither of them really cared about. He didn't move, just breathed in deeply. And slowly, gently, he tilted his head until hers rested fully against his chest. She heard his heartbeat. It wasn't as steady as she imagined. It was human. This wasn't in the contract, she whispered, eyes closed. No, but maybe it's the only part that actually matters, he replied. When she returned to her floor, later that night, alone, well past midnight, she caught her reflection in the mirror. Her face looked different. Lighter? Or just more exposed? Maybe it was the beginning of a feeling she knew she should avoid. But there, between a polished lie and a quiet truth, something unnamed began to take root, growing like an invisible thread under both their feet. The invitation came with urgency and gold trim. Lunch with Mrs. Westbrook, Thursday, 1 p.m. Emily had never heard of her. She didn't need to. The last name was enough to tighten her chest. Julian's mother, a widow, matriarch of an empire built on old values, rigidity, and appearances. Julian didn't bother to hide his discomfort when he saw the card. She's a test, he said simply. A test of what? How far you can go pretending to love someone you can't even touch. Emily gave a dry laugh. So, the same test you take every day. The Westbrook estate wasn't a home. It was an institution. White brick, towering columns, symmetrical gardens, a place built to suppress anything spontaneous. Mrs. Clarice Westbrook greeted them with a smile as cold as it was polite. So this is the seamstress, she said, making no effort to hide her tone. Emily tried to respond with grace. Every word was a quiet war between staying dignified and not spitting the contempt back. Julian said little, almost nothing, but his eyes, always controlled, looked different there, as if something in him retreated every time he stepped into that house. During dessert, Clarice poured tea with perfect posture, then looked at Emily with a mix of disdain and condescension. Do you truly believe this is love? Or are you just allowing yourself to dream? Emily placed her teacup down gently. The entire room seemed to still. I don't dream of rich men, Mrs. Westbrook. I dream of peace. And right now, your son gives me more of that than the entire world ever has. Clarice held her smile, but clutched her spoon a little tighter. Julian raised an eyebrow, surprised. There was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Respect, and something else. In the car, the silence between them was thick. You stood up to her. You walked away. He looked at her with something between regret and admiration. I never learned how to stand up to her. Then learn, she said firmly. Because if you want me to keep playing this part, you'll have to start protecting me too. Not just your image. Julian pulled the car over, parked, killed the engine. It's not just an act anymore, Amelie. She went still. Then what is it? He hesitated. For the first time in a long time, he had no immediate answer. It's something that scares me. Because it's not in the contract. Because I can't control it. Because it's you. She felt her eyes sting. Not from weakness, but because hearing that, in that way, broke open something she had kept locked away for too long. You can't give me pieces of yourself, Julian. If you want this, whatever this is, you have to come whole, with your shadows, your flaws, even your pain. He ran a hand through his hair, tense. You're the only person who says that to me. The only one who isn't afraid to lose me. She leaned in, gently touched his face with her fingertips. Maybe that's because I never really had you. Not for real. And then without staging, without script, without witnesses, he kissed her. Not like in the photo shoots. Not as part of the show, but like someone who had finally stopped running. And like someone who knew that, in doing so, he was putting everything at risk. Later that night, alone in her room, Amelie cried. Not because of love, but because of fear. Because now, there was something to lose. The morning after the kiss, Amelie woke with a strange sense that something was about to collapse. Julian hadn't sent a message, hadn't shown up. No gesture, no signal. She tried to rationalize. Meetings, obligations, maybe even nerves.
After all, the kiss hadn't been part of the agreement. But when she came down to the lobby, she noticed two men in suits speaking with the doorman. One of them held a black folder. The other, a photo. Her photo! That afternoon, her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. "All Miss Dawson? This is Westbrook International's security department. We need you to come to headquarters immediately. It's urgent." In the mirrored conference room, where the ceiling reflected the floor, and the floor reflected her growing unease, a lawyer slid a file across the table. "Do you know the name Elijah Dawson?" The world stopped. 1 second. 2. "He's my brother. He's alive." The words hit her like muffled thunder. "Where?" The attorney exchanged a glance with another man at the back of the room. "It's more complicated than that. Elijah Dawson has been under investigation for 2 years. He's been linked to a contract diversion scheme inside one of Westbrook's subsidiaries, even before the company was acquired by Julian Westbrook." "That's impossible," Amelie said, pulling back in her chair. "My brother he'd never get involved in something like that. We understand your personal connection, but the evidence is consistent, and Mr. Westbrook has already been informed." She stood abruptly, the floor seeming to tilt beneath her feet. Julian knew. Her voice cracked. "He found out this morning, and he suspended all activity associated with the Dawson name, including the public partnership with you." Hours later, she stormed into his office. Julian was alone, back turned to the door. When he heard her, he turned slowly, like he'd been expecting this. "You knew, I found out this morning. And you didn't come to me, didn't say anything?" Her voice shook, but not from fear, from disappointment. "Because I was trying to figure out if it was real, or if you were sent." She stepped back, as if she'd just been slapped by something invisible. "You think I lied? That all of this was part of some plan?" Julian said nothing, but his silence spoke too loudly. "You kissed me yesterday," she whispered, "and today, you doubt my soul." "I'm not doubting your soul, Amelie," he said, stepping closer. "But I'm trying to protect mine." Too late. She turned and walked out, not crying, but with her head held high, because now she knew, the heart she had begun to offer, had no place to land, and outside, the city felt colder than ever, but inside her, something burned, no longer the desire to belong, not even fear. Now it was rage. Rage for a lost brother, rage for being discarded, rage for still loving him, even now, and that rage would bring her back. Not to ask for love, but to demand the truth. She spent 2 days in silence, ignored phone calls, didn't reply to messages, not even Julian's. But she didn't cry, not this time, because inside her, a new Amelie was being born. Harder, more determined, more dangerous. Not for revenge, but for justice. She returned to the only place where Elijah had left traces before vanishing.
an old warehouse in Queens, where he had worked as an IT technician for a small cybersecurity company, a company that was later acquired by Westbrook International. There, she found the former manager, a short man with a patchy beard and jittery hands. "You were his sister?" he asked, almost in disbelief. "I am, and I don't believe he did what they're saying." The man hesitated, then locked the door and pulled down the blinds. Elijah discovered an internal surveillance scheme. The company was selling access to private data to external investors. He wanted to expose it. Disappeared 2 days after telling me. "Did you tell anyone?" "No. Who would listen? They had money. We didn't." Amelie felt her stomach twist. "Do you have proof?" The man pulled a USB drive from his pocket. "He gave me this. Told me to hand it over only if something happened to him. I never had the courage. Until now." Back at the apartment, Amelie spent the entire night reviewing the files, and what she found made her tremble. Internal documents, access codes, recorded conversations, transactions hidden behind false names, and among the names, Clarisse Westbrook, Julian's mother. This wasn't just a corporate scandal. It was personal, familial, blood deep. The woman who had humiliated her at lunch, who called her the little seamstress, who tried to push her aside from the very beginning. And now, there she was, tied to the very scheme Elijah had tried to expose. The next morning, Amelie walked into Julian's office, but this time, not as a fiancée, as Elijah Dawson's sister, and the only person who now knew what he didn't. Julian looked surprised to see her, and exhausted. "Why did you come back?" She placed the USB on the desk. "Because you need the truth, and because I won't let anyone smear my brother's name, just to protect your families." Julian looked at the object, then at her. "What's on it?" "The evidence. But it's not just about executives. It's closer to you than you think." He didn't ask. He took the flash drive, closed the door. "Wait here." For nearly an hour, Amelie sat alone in the boardroom. But this time, she didn't feel small or out of place. She was the key, the bridge between a buried past and an inconvenient truth. When Julian returned, he was pale. "My mother is involved," he said quietly. She knew, and silenced Elijah. Amelie stepped forward. "Do you still think I came here to destroy you?" He shook his head, eyes red. "No, I think you came to wake me up." And in that moment, something between them shifted forever. It was no longer just attraction or complicity. It was a war they now shared, and no one walks away from a war like that untouched. Julian paced his glass office, shoulders heavy like he carried the weight of a legacy. The late afternoon sun spilled through the panels, but he stood stuck in the shadow. Amelie watched him silently. Not the CEO, not the heir, but the son, the man torn between loyalty and truth. "Are you going to cover it up?" she asked, bluntly. He stopped, took a deep breath. "If I cover this up, I become an accomplice, and I lose whatever piece of myself is left. And if you expose it, you lose everything." "Maybe not everything." He looked her in the eyes. "Do I still have you?" She hesitated. "You only have me, if you're real to the very end." The next morning, Julian called for a surprise press conference. The room was packed. Cameras, reporters, investors. Clarisse Westbrook sat in the front row, wearing her signature rehearsed smile. Julian stepped onto the stage. No teleprompter, no rehearsed speech. "Today, I was supposed to announce a major global expansion, but before that, I have a truth to share. A truth that might cost me everything, but might give me my soul back." The room held its breath. "My company, my family, covered up crimes, diverted funds, and tried to silence those who dared to expose it. One of those names is Elijah Dawson, and this is a long overdue correction." Clarisse stood abruptly. All eyes turned. She looked at her son, like he'd committed betrayal. But he didn't flinch. "I've chosen the truth, and with it, I choose to lose everything, except the chance to sleep in peace." That night, Julian was removed from his position. The press exploded. Clarisse left the country with the family's legal team. The name Westbrook became synonymous with scandal and courage. And Amelie, she didn't return to the high-rise apartment
or to the theater of appearances. She returned to Brooklyn, to a small atelier she opened with her own savings, and with the anonymous investment a certain former CEO had filed before his downfall. 2 months passed. She was sewing the final detail on a simple white dress, for a real client, with a real love, when the doorbell rang. Julian stood there.
No security, no black car, no armor, just him. I don't have an empire anymore. No titles, no last name that opens doors. Then why are you here? Because I realized that what's left is what truly matters. And if you still want me, Amélie, not as a project, not as a contract, but as a man trying to rebuild, I'm staying. She looked at him. Staying. To live, for real. He nodded. She opened the door, and for the first time, with no deals, no duties, no masks, they chose each other. Months went by. The Westbrook name faded from the headlines. The company was dismantled. Clarisse never returned to the country. And Julian, now just Julian, learned to walk down streets unnoticed, to order coffee without being recognized, to live a life where each step didn't echo through a boardroom. He discovered silence could feel like freedom. Amélie thrived, slowly. Her atelier became a quiet sensation among women who wanted more than dresses. They wanted stories, truths stitched with care. She created pieces with meaning. Names like New Start, Memory, Resilience. One day, a client asked her, "Were you ever rich?" She smiled. "No, but I once had everything that mattered, even when it didn't look like it." Julian never went back to running a company, but he started teaching corporate ethics at a small university in Harlem. He began with 5 students. Now there were 32. One night, as he left class, he found a note stuck to his car door. "Losing everything was your miracle." There was no signature, but he knew who it was from. On Sundays, Amélie and Julian walked through the park hand in hand, with a rescue dog named Bowie. They didn't talk about what could have been if nothing had happened. They talked about how beautiful it was that it did. "Do you still miss your old world?" she asked one afternoon, as they sat on a wooden bench at sunset. "Sometimes," he said. "But then I remember, the old world never gave me this." She rested her head on his shoulder. "And what's this?" Julian smiled. "Peace. And love that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone." On the wall of Amélie's atelier, there was a framed photo. It was the cobalt blue dress, the one from the window, the one that started it all. And beside it, a phrase hand-stitched into fabric. It wasn't luck, it was courage. And if this story touched you in any way, drop a "they deserved it" in the comments. Sometimes, that's all it takes to keep believing.